The first note was folded into a perfect square and smelled faintly of my perfume. I found it on Jonah's pillow at 2:17 a.m., the exact minute the radiator in our brownstone coughs and the city briefly holds its breath. His bed was a warm hollow of sheets and dinosaur pajamas, his favorite blue whale curled where his head should have been. The window latch was unhooked, not broken, and the curtain breathed in and out with the February wind like the apartment had lungs. I didn't scream. I didn't know yet if silence was smart or complicit. The note rasped when I unfolded it, paper thick as a wedding invitation. Don't call the police. Wait for instructions, he's safe. The letters were blocky, careful, the kind of handwriting people use when they want you to think they're strangers. Down the hall, the night smelled like lemon cleaner and cold metal. Somewhere outside, a garbage truck exhaled. The sound rumbled up through the floorboards and into my ribs. I pressed my palm to the headboard as if the wood could tell me where my son had gone. I could still feel the warmth where he slept. It made my hand hurt. My phone lit the room blue. A text from an unknown number slid over the lock screen like a dare. Call 911 now. Trust me. I stared at the two instructions. The papers don't, the phones do. Like a grammar problem I could solve if only I diagrammed it right. Daniel, I whispered, but my voice was the softest version of itself, the one I use when I don't want to be overheard by the wrong kind of darkness. My husband didn't answer. He was 2 floors up in his glass office, asleep on a leather couch he bought because the architect said the room wanted one. I stepped into the hall, the runner rug rough under my bare feet, and felt the old house tilt toward its secrets. I have spent my career telling people which truths to say out loud. That night, the building told me in its own language, pipe knocks, window breath, the thin whisper of paper, that truth was going to happen to me whether I orchestrated it or not. I kept the note. I took a breath that tasted like pennies. I made a choice. If 2 instructions tell you to run and to freeze at the same time, which one keeps your child breathing?
I'm a person you hire when your life explodes on the front page. Crisis communications is its own kind of triage. Gather facts, apply pressure where the bleeding is visible, distract the public with a cleaner wound. I used to say I saved people. Now I say I kept people intact long enough to learn how to save themselves. If that sounds noble, it isn't. It's surgical theater with better coffee. I grew up in Corona, Queens, 3 flights up, the MTA's breath in the window, my mother counting tips on the kitchen table and my older sister Rainey turning her essays into scholarship money. I was the quiet one, the kid who made chore charts with color-coded markers. Yale felt like a dare I somehow won. PR felt like a language I'd always spoken, verbs like shape, escort, revise. I met Daniel at a fundraiser with peonies so large they looked fake. He was a founder then and had the posture of a man who's already explained himself too many times. Lean in, smile with only half your mouth, don't blink at the number you're about to say. Our worlds snapped together like magnets. He liked that I could turn a disaster into an anecdote. I liked that he called me steady in a room full of people testing what they could get away with. We bought a brownstone in the West Village because we were told neighborhoods have reputations like colleges. Our son, Jonah, arrived on a Saturday when the rain was soft and the city smelled like warm concrete. He has my sister's watchfulness and Daniel's stubborn jaw. He calls me Mama still, as if the word might break if he switches. Routine is my one religion. Jonah's school drop-offs, violin Tuesdays, swimming Thursdays. Pilar, our nanny, has a voice that can hush storms. Simon, the driver, smells faintly of aftershave and peppermint gum. On Sundays, we pancake. On Mondays, I triage. The domestic schedule sits next to the crisis calendar, and I play both without dropping a plate. A year ago, I worked a case everyone in Midtown whispered about and pretended not to. A CFO from Daniel's company got a DUI on the FDR and hit a parked car hard enough to make the airbags angry. No one was hurt. We turned the story into stress and lessons learned. I escorted apologies, massaged quotes, killed a photo. I told myself the man was salvageable because believing otherwise would turn my job into a full-time guilt. Rainey used to call me and say, "Ellie, stop building prettier houses around the same rot." She went into journalism the hard way. No ad dollars, only stubbornness, and a network of people who return your calls because you answer theirs at midnight. We stopped speaking after a story she wrote about a hedge fund that bled a hospital. She wanted me to leak. I refused. She said I'd traded the girl from Corona for someone who knows how to choose euphemisms. The last time we saw each other, she stood on my stoop with a book for Jonah and said, "One day, you won't get to chore chart the truth." I laughed like that was a thing that could happen to other people. It was a Tuesday, 2 nights before my son's bed became an empty outline, when I smelled bleach in the hallway at a time no one should be cleaning. I made a note in my head and forgot it, the way you forget weather when you live in a city that makes its own. The next night, Daniel and I argued about a line item in his life I'd found by accident, a storage unit under a company name that didn't exist last quarter. He said surprise like he was practicing a kinder version and then didn't finish the sentence. We slept in our different rooms and pretended we weren't. 2 days later, Jonah's window breathed in and out, and the note made a sound like a secret tearing itself open. I texted Pilar, "Are you awake?" No dots. Simon, "Did you drop anything at the house?" He sent a question mark and then "no ma'am" with the period, which meant no. My job taught me how to calibrate a room, how to hear games the second they begin. That night, the room was my home. The game was mine. If your skill set is controlling narratives, what does it mean when the narrative starts controlling you?
The call I made was not to 911. It was to Pilar. "Where are you?" I asked, whispering like walls eavesdrop. "At my sister's," she said, voice hoarse with sleep. "What's wrong?" "Jonah is not in his bed," I said. Saying it out loud dropped me into a different weather. "There's a note telling me not to call the police and a text telling me to." "Which one will you obey?" Pilar asked, the kind of question you only get from people who change your child's bandages. "Both," I said, "and neither." I swallowed. "Come." Daniel stepped into the doorway as I hung up. His hair was mussed into a young man version of itself. His eyes weren't. "What's going on?" he asked, voice low like we were co-conspirators in some late-night prank. I held the paper out. He read it, jaw flexing. "We call the police," he said, decisive. Then my phone glowed again. Second instruction. "Don't trust him." The same unknown number. 3 dots blinked, then vanished. A blank after a threat is worse than the threat. "Who's texting you?" Daniel said. Let me see." I didn't hand him the phone. Not because I didn't trust him, because the text had asked me not to, and for one idiotic second I acted as if instructions from an anonymous number had authority. "This could be a test," Daniel said, words clipped like he was writing a memo in his head. "A dry run. I hired a firm last month after the Parkers' security scare, family drills, protocols. The city's a circus." "You hired a firm to kidnap our child?" My voice came out wrong, light, almost amused. "I have learned to sound pleasant while translating disaster." "It's a simulation," he snapped, the word making my mouth sour. "They move him, watch how we react, then hand him back before morning. It exposes gaps, it's responsible." "And you didn't tell me." "It defeats the purpose if you rehearse the rehearsal." The radiator knocked once, an old pipe clearing its throat to say, "Absolutely not." I felt my body choose a side before my brain did. I dialed 911. The operator's voice had the exact calm you envy. "NYPD emergency. My son is missing," I said. The words had weight. They landed with a thud. "He's 6. We're at 11 Bank Street. There's a note. The window's unlatched. Stay on the line. Do not touch anything else. Officers are en route." Daniel paced, mouthing words at a person he wasn't on the phone with. I heard him form breach contract and liability. He looked like a man staring at a spreadsheet and watching it behave like an animal. Pilar arrived in a sweatshirt that smelled like baby shampoo and rain. She went straight to Jonah's closet, not to check for him. She knew he was gone. But to kneel in front of the lower shelf where he keeps the things he hides from himself. Marbles, a Lego head, a paper crane she made him last summer out of a map of Queens. It was missing. She made 3, and they lived together.
People who love your child notice when a paper bird flies. The front door buzzer bleated. 2 officers, then a detective with a braid and a coat that meant she lived in her car. Detective Aisha Vargas, she said, brisk, kind. The house filled with the smell of wet wool and fresh air siphoned in by bodies. She took in the room the way I take in a crisis. Angles, faces, danger disguised as furniture. Tell me everything. Tell me nothing you're not sure you know. I showed her the note. She read it once, then again, and did not hand it back. My phone purred. New text. Confess your lie before sunrise. Then you'll get him. No name, no instructions, just a sentence so intimate I went cold at the back of my neck. What lie? Daniel asked. It was half curious, half accusation. Detective Vargas's pen slowed. She looked at me like a person checking a compass. I kept my face where I keep it during depositions, on something in the middle distance that looks like truth and feels like a bluff. I handle other people's lies, I said. That's my job. Tonight, your job is to tell me the story you'll be able to live with later. A second note slid under the front door and shuddered to a stop on the hall rug. The house is old, doors breathe, and paper skates. Vargas held up a hand, don't move, then crossed the foyer like a person learning to dance in a room full of glassware. She bent, gloved, lifted the square. Bring $1 million in cash to Pier 57 at dawn. Come alone, no police. Contradiction, now printed. Vargas looked at me. 2 authors, 2 agendas. The radiator knocked twice. Somewhere in the city, a siren rehearsed its song. If your child is the prize in a tug-of-war between stories, how do you decide which one to drop first?
Vargas set up a small command at our kitchen island, clearing a space between the bowl of oranges and Jonah's half-built Lego rocket. Coffee steamed. The house smelled like espresso and wet coats, lemon cleaner, and the aftertaste of fear. A CSU tech powdered the window latch with a brush that moved like a whisper. The powder was the color of fog. I wanted to cough and didn't. We collected the notes and evidence sleeves that sighed when sealed. Vargas crouched to speak to Pilar, her voice lowering to the register adults use when they want you to remember you're safe. Anything off lately? She asked. Visitors, contractors, repairs? 2 weeks ago, Pilar said, eyes fixed on the paper crane she'd found perched on the baseboard behind the curtain. The electrician came to look at the downstairs buzzers. He smelled like cigarettes and told me he quit. Name? Vargas asked. Pilar shook her head. Work order didn't have one. Simon stood in the doorway, hands clasped like he was at church. The only thing odd was a black Suburban idling on Bank Street last Friday. No plates up front, he offered. Could be a neighbor, could be anyone. This city is everyone. Daniel kept stepping away to take calls and then not taking them, his phone lighting with names, CFO, Liam, Sentinel Security, General Counsel. His voice was edges. We contracted a firm for readiness, he told Vargas finally, like the words might grant him an exemption from being human. They were supposed to conduct drills, nothing like this. What's the firm? Vargas asked. Sentinel, he said, jaw working. She nodded once. I know them. Ex-military types who like to sell fear with a side of tactics. I'm going to call their founder, and then I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, and it won't be a drill. The second text came at 3:08. If you care, go to the storage unit. You already know which one. Another at 3:10. Ignore him. Bring cash. It was like watching a fight over a radio station. I don't have a storage unit, I said too quickly. Daniel looked at me, then away. We had argued about his storage unit with the Phantom Company, and now a stranger knew about it. Secrets are never singular. They come with handles other people can grab. Vargas put a hand on the counter, steadying the room. We split the difference, she said. I send a team to Pier 57 with eyes and ears, but no approach. You and I go to the storage unit you don't have. She didn't smile. Make the call, Mr. Rhodes. Tell Sentinel to meet me here if they want to remain relevant. We drove through a city half asleep, the tires hissing on wet pavement. The Suburban's heat smelled faintly of plastic and coffee. The sky over the Hudson had that bruise color right before dawn, the river a long, moving mirror.
Pier 57's a circus when the food hall opens, Vargas said, eyes on the mirrors. But at dawn, it's a church. Good place to watch someone make a mistake. The storage facility was a grid of corrugated doors, painted a red that tried too hard. Daniel typed a code, the lock clacked, the metal roll-up rasped, a sound I felt in my fillings. Inside, shelves organized the way I organize crisis calendars, labels, bins, a dignity of order. Camping supplies, a generator, pallets of bottled water, a box labeled first aid in a neat hand I recognized as Daniel's. On the far shelf, a smaller bin labeled Jonah in my handwriting. My throat went hot. I opened it. Inside, duplicate dinosaur pajamas, a Lego set, 3 of his favorite books, a blanket from his crib, a stuffed whale twin. Items you might pack if you were preparing for a disaster and wanted it to feel less like one. "What is this?" I asked. The words dragged. "Preparedness," Daniel said, like he was auditioning for a PSA. "After the Parker thing, you built my son a second bedroom in a corrugated closet." "In case," he said. "Just in case." The air in the unit felt thin. Paper rustled under my foot. I stepped back and saw another note. This one slid under the bin like a coin. "Confess. You know which lie. It's not his, it's yours." Vargas angled it under her penlight. "She's playing 2 games," she said. "Ransom and repentance." "Who texts repentance?" I said. My voice went brittle. "Priests with burner phones?" Pilar's paper crane sat on top of the Jonah bin, a little mat bird from a city he knows how to name streets in. Pilar had never been in this unit. I felt the room, a metal box in a world that loves stories, shift under a fact I couldn't place. Back at the house, Sentinel's founder waited in our kitchen with his hands clasped behind his back, the way men do when they want to show you they're not reaching for a weapon. "Liam Hartley," he said. He did not offer to shake Detective Vargas's hand. Mistake. "You move our kid?" Daniel asked, fury banked. Hartley shook his head once. "We schedule drills, we role-play entry points, we coach. We do not extract children without a signed plan and escorts. We didn't move your son." "Someone used your language to get past our judgment," Vargas said. "Congratulations on building a believable lie." The dawn leaked into the kitchen, pale and unforgiving. Vargas's phone buzzed. She listened, face still. "Pier 57 team reports a single male pacing, no bag, no obvious counter-surveillance. Then a second male arrives and they both leave without exchanging anything. The pier was a ghost of a plan." "I think you can stage a ransom note. You can stage the place it points to," I said, trying to keep my mouth from shaking. "Who benefits from the confession?" Vargas asked me quietly. "Not the ransom, the confession." Rain's face arrived in my mind like a slide slotted into a projector. Her last text to me, from a number I didn't save because that's how cowards organize their phones. "One day truth will ask for itself. When the people who want your money and the people who want your honesty speak at the same time, which one do you hear in your own voice?"
At 6:11 a.m., a courier dropped an unmarked envelope at our stoop. It wasn't the mail. It was an old-fashioned act. Knock, vanish, leave you holding weight. The paper was heavier than it should have been for what it held. A single page torn from a notebook I hadn't seen in 15 years. I knew the paper by the fiber, the color, the way my undergraduate self had pressed too hard when I was trying to make myself legible to strangers. It was a page from a journal I kept senior year, therapy before I had money for therapy. The entry was about a story I changed for a client last quarter, thinly anonymized, the words "not a crime" underlined twice. The handwriting was mine. My stomach went cold behind my ribs. Detective Vargas watched me read and watched me swallow, and didn't interrupt. "This is," I said, then stopped. The page smelled faintly like my mother's apartment in Corona, old dust and fabric softener. I had thrown that journal away. I do not throw things away. I archive, I label, I keep. "How did someone end up with a page I ripped out of a book I tossed over a decade ago?" I asked the room. "The better question," Vargas said, "is why they picked this page and not others. What are they trying to make you say out loud?" I knew what. I had once ghost wrote an apology for a man who did not feel sorry.
I had asked the photographer for grace and a fee schedule. I had convinced a DA that scandal fatigue was a public health issue. The page was a mirror that caught me at my least defensible angle. Another envelope arrived. This one slid under the door like a dare. Inside, a photocopy of a birth announcement that never ran, with my name misspelled the way my grandmother used to say it, and a post-it. You moved words for a living. Move the right ones now. I could taste iron. I don't faint, but if I did, that would have been the moment. I called Rain. Her voicemail picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and wry. "Leave it here," it said. "If you're selling a better story, I already have the first draft." I hung up, texted, "Where are you?" Watched the dots appear and disappear, the international sign for "I know you're looking." When the reply came, it was a photo. The stage of Jonah's school auditorium, red velvet curtain, and the scuffed wood that smells like dust and tempera paint. A timestamp, 11:30 p.m. "Is that from—" Daniel started, but his voice fell into itself. "Auditorium," I said. "Our sons." "Don't go," he said. "It's a trap." "It's an invitation," I said. "Traps and invitations use the same font." Vargas studied the photo. "We do this my way," she said. "Ghosted backup, everything on, nothing heroic. If your sister is in this, we keep her alive long enough to hate her decisions." "She's not my—" I started, then stopped. Rain and I hadn't spoken in months. I had let a silence grow moss. That doesn't unsister a person. Before the night, the third note arrived with handwriting the same as the first, and a request that felt like a copy of a copy. Cash by tomorrow, alone. The phone, meanwhile, sent a final message at dusk. "No money. Tell the truth. Come alone or he waits longer." 2 authors, 2 agendas, 1 child. What do you do when the first twist in your story is that the kidnapper might be the person who taught you how to tell the truth?
New York at 11 p.m. in February is a city of breath. You see it in clouds around strangers' mouths, in the thin smoke around the halal carts, in the way subway grates cough steam like old pipes telling secrets. I walk to the school with a mic taped under my collarbone, the way TV hosts wear them when they want to sound like themselves later. Vargas's plan involved 3 cars, 4 earpieces, and a phrase I had only ever used in rooms with executives. Contingencies abound. Daniel wanted to come. Vargas said no. Pilar pressed my hand and tucked a St. Jude medallion into my pocket with the practiced stealth of a woman who has smuggled comfort into harder rooms than this. The auditorium doors were propped. Inside, the wood smelled like old applause. My footsteps echoed like I was the kind of person who announces herself by accident. On the stage, a single work light glowed like a cheap moon. A note on the lectern, under a school newsletter that insisted Pajama Day was Friday, not Thursday. "Leave your phone at the second row center seat." I placed my phone where the note told me, even though a piece of tape under my silk blouse made the entire request performative. "Ellie," a voice said from the dark. "Rain." The work light found the edge of her face and made a line down the bridge of her nose. She looked like sleeplessness had moved in and refused to pay rent. "You came." "I took my son," I said. "It was not the place for hugging." "I hid him," she said, "from the men who think drills are a father's love and from the men who think ransom is a sport. Your husband bought a scenario. Your husband's enemies bought the same prop." "You had no right," I said. My voice had heat again. It scared me how good it felt. "You don't draft children into your war." She took that and didn't flinch. "I left you instructions to tell the truth so I can hand him back and show you where the rot keeps growing," she said softly. "Then someone else put different instructions in the same house and told you to pay them for your terror." "Where is he?" I said. It came out almost gentle. My body wanted to shout. My body wanted sleep. "Close," she said, and the word was a confession. "Close enough that you could have found him the second you believed me." "You hid him in my home?" The sentence tasted like rust. "The safe room," she said.
Every brownstone has a story layered under the story the realtor tells. Yours has a panic room from the 80s renovated by a man who thought the world would end in 99. Daniel kept it up, of course he did. He changed the access code to something he would remember. Old men choose birthdays, new men choose dates when money moves. Yours chose your wedding date backward. Don't do this, I said. Don't turn my life into a lesson in how to read me. Ellie, she said, stepping into the work light, I did this because you only listen to your own voice when it's talking to a room. I needed you to say out loud the thing you turned into a footnote. You ghost wrote an apology for a man who didn't own his harm, and then you slept fine. I did not sleep fine, I said, but it sounded like a child, and I hated how quick I was to perform innocence. You want my confession, you got it. I said the words, "Where is my son?" Rain looked past me to the dark where Vargas floated and pretended she didn't. The safe room, she said again, under the third-floor library, behind the bookcase with the not actually rare Dickens. I didn't take him out of the house. I moved him down the hall while you argued with a man who thinks preparedness is love. I smelled bleach, I said, and the fact made a new kind of sense in my mouth. It's not for blood, she said dryly. It's for fingerprints you don't want collected by people who file things in corners. And the other notes, I asked, Pier 57, cash. Those weren't you. No, she said. That was your husband's world saying, while we're here. Something behind me creaked, the sound of wood bowing to wait. Daniel stepped into the aisle with a flashlight and a face he only wears in boardrooms where someone is about to be fired. He had followed. Of course he had. A man who builds a storage unit paradise for a 6-year-old is not the kind of man who sits in the kitchen when his wife goes to meet the one person who calls his prepared love a stunt. You're both insane, he said mildly. Vigilante sister, martyr wife. Our son is in a room I paid to keep polished and safe. He ate fruit snacks and watched Planet Earth. He is fine. Vargas's voice came over the earpiece so soft I thought I imagined it. Keep him talking. You used him, I said to Daniel, because new anger had a better mouthfeel than old shame. You protected him, he said, from the world you keep feeding and calling it the public square. Rain stepped off the stage, each heel squeaking on the polished wood like a terrible orchestra. Men like you make money off fear and then sell the cure, she said, voice low, as if the building might bite if she raised it. You don't get to call the rest of us insane because we refuse to buy your brochure. Where is he? I said again, to both of them, to the city that had been holding its breath since 2:17. Daniel angled the flashlight at the floor by my feet. Where he'll sleep tonight if you stop performing, he said, as if the word were a spell, or where we'll keep him longer if you decide to turn this into a press conference. Vargas's whisper again, calm as rain. On my count, move down stage left. In the chaos that followed, 2 officers blooming out of the dark like the auditorium made them. Vargas's hand on Daniel's wrist, Rain backing up, palms out like a woman in a painting who knows how a caption ends. I realized 2 things at once. Jonah was safe, and there are versions of the word safe that leave a taste in your mouth you never forget. When the room where your child sleeps doubles as the room where your marriage dies, which door do you close first?
I had a choice, and it wasn't between police and ransom anymore. It was between the version of me who could keep everything pretty and the version who could survive ugly. Detective Vargas asked for everything. My journals, the copy of the birth announcement, the page with my college handwriting. If the state subpoenas, they get a story without context, she said. Give it to me now, and we make the context the point. I gave her the box of paper I'd curated for myself, the museum of what I had been. I called my mother and told her the kind of truth in a voice she could carry. I called a client and said, I cannot be your person this week, and didn't apologize. I called a reporter friend I still trusted and read her a statement that didn't sound like me because it used fewer commas. I did work I regret. I said yes to a strategy that hurt people. I'm telling you this because it's part of the thing you're about to ask me about anyway.
No, I will not give you anything about my son. Daniel called our lawyer. Our lawyer said phrases like civil exposure in joint messaging. I told him that joint was over. He asked if this was an emotional decision. It's a mother decision, I said, which is both an answer and a warning. I chose to stop narrating the story and start living it like a person who can stand in court without swallowing her own tongue. Once you choose the version of yourself that tells the truth, even when your room prefers a performance, how much of your life do you get to keep?
We found the safe room behind a bookcase that never liked being touched. The mechanism hid in a carved rosette. Press, slide. The hush of old wood giving permission. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of cedar and the plastic that never stops outgassing. A low hum from the HVAC made the space feel like a train that never moves. Jonah blinked in the dim light and smiled sleepily like we'd come to fetch him from a nap. He had goldfish crackers on his sweater and a blanket around his shoulders. The TV on the wall was paused on a humpback whale, open-mouthed like a door. He held out his hand for mine, without looking at which me he was reaching for. He knows the shape of me without light. I sank to my knees and put my face in his hair. He smelled like apples and dust and the shampoo Pilar uses that makes his curls behave. When he asked if it was still night, I said yes, even though it was morning by hours I didn't count. Daniel stood in the doorway with a face that had already rehearsed its arguments. He was never in danger, he said, a man selecting a narrative from a rack of suits. He was in the safest room in the house because I built it. You hid our son, I said. From me. From the city, he corrected. Detective Vargas's hand settled on his forearm just above the expensive watch. From the police, she said. It wasn't a question. He didn't answer the way you don't answer when the answer decides you're mourning. She read him his rights in a voice that managed to be both human and firm. He didn't fight. Men who rely on words always know when words have stopped working. The second twist arrived with a ping on my phone as we climbed the narrow stairs back to air. A text from an unknown number, but not one of the ransom repentance voices. This one used punctuation like it meant it. I did not intend for him to be there overnight, it said. I planned to return him at midnight. The other notes were not mine. Be careful, he has other rooms you don't know about. R. Other rooms, Vargas repeated, scanning the landing where the wallpaper bubbles if the radiator gets ideas. Meaning storage or meaning secrets? Both, I said, feeling suddenly stupid for not having imagined that a man who cataloged my son's comfort could also catalog his exits. Rain turned herself in that afternoon, walked into the precinct with a lawyer who looked like he cuts his own hair, and said she wanted to make a statement. She told a story that made me ache and made me angry. She'd piggybacked on the very drill Daniel hinted about to force me to confess the thing I insulate from myself with nicer words. She had eyes on my house long enough to map the routines the way journalists map, but worse, because love makes you arrogant. She had taped one note under my car seat and placed another in the mail slot and instructed me to tell the truth, expecting the story to end at midnight when she texted me a single word, now. I did not write Pier 57, she said to Vargas, not to me. I did not ask for money. I only asked her to use the voice she bills by the hour. I thought I could control the storm I called. You brought a tornado to a city that already has weather, Vargas said, but her voice wasn't cruel. I wanted to forgive Rain and wanted to never see her again, and the wanting made a knot at the base of my skull. Jonah sat in the next room, drawing whales with a blue crayon that had survived the safe room, humming a tune from planet Earth. I counted my son's breaths like a metronome for my own. The other room's text turned out to mean a small set of off-site places, a Weehawken office with a gun safe I did not know about, a midtown condo in a trust with a name like a boat, an account that had moved money the day I smelled bleach. Daniel had planned something bigger than drills. He had planned a family he could archive. When Vargas's team entered the Weehawken space with a warrant that tasted like victory, They found a wall of camera showing the rooms in our home from angles I did not know existed. Not hidden in showers, he had a line, but the library, the hallway, the kitchen, Jonah's room. To make sure it works when it matters, he had told the installer in an email the DA printed as if ink could slow fury. He was arrested for obstruction and unlawful surveillance, and a few things with longer names. He posted bail with an ease that made me dizzy. He stood outside the courthouse and told a camera he had made every choice to keep his family safe. The clip made people nod if they believed in men like him, and made others call for a fire that I didn't want to start. Rain pled to a lesser charge with a condition that involved community service and lectures where she taught young reporters how not to turn truth into dare. She apologized to me without asking me to forgive her. I did both slowly and out loud, which is harder and better. If the second twist is that the person who tried to save you from your performance still wrote an act you didn't audition for, how do you clap without making the wrong sound?
You expect climaxes to be loud. Mine was the quiet of a door closing, where you decide the sound means freedom. Jonah and I spent 2 nights at my mother's in Queens while the house was cleaned of cameras and men with clipboards. Her apartment smelled like Sofrito and old magazines. The 7 train sighed outside the window like an old friend who never leaves. Pilara slept on the couch and taught Jonah a paper fold she swore was new but had the exact creases as the crane he'd lost. Safety sometimes looks like repetition. On the 3rd morning, I met Daniel at the brownstone with Detective Vargas and a locksmith who moved like he believed in metal. The house felt like it was holding its breath, as if waiting to see what we would decide it is now. Daniel looked smaller in the foyer, like the architecture had stopped respecting him. "This is all unseemly," he said, which is a word men use when the truth isn't flattering. "You turned our house into a test you wanted to ace. You failed." He spread his hands as if showing me he wasn't holding anything. "You wanted honesty," he said. "This is mine. The world is sharp. Men ask me for money and come back with knives if I say no. If you hate how I love, fine. But if we're cataloging harm, don't forget the part where your sister—" "Say her name," I said. He swallowed. "Rain. Used our son as a lever." He took a breath that sounded too practiced. "We are a match set, Ellie. I control, you curate. We call it parenting because no one pays for a brochure labeled containment." Vargas's voice was a river-cutting rock. "You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Rhodes," she said. "You should try it." I thought of the other rooms again, the way he made duplicates for Jonah of everything he loved in a unit with corrugated walls, the way he stored our comfort in places where I would have to ask permission to retrieve them. This was never just about safety. It was about authorship. "I'm filing for separation," I said. I felt the sentence land in my ankles, steadying me in my shoes. "You will see Jonah when and how a judge decides. If you want me to read your statement before you give it to the press, I won't." He smiled then, small and tired. "You're going to make yourself the hero," he said. "I'm going to stop being your ghostwriter," I said. The locksmith's drill whined. Metal dust hung in the air and tasted like pennies and old arguments. Vargas walked me through a plan that sounded like breathing. New locks, new codes, a camera system with fewer eyes and better ethics, a therapist for a 6-year-old who slept fine in a room that hummed, and a mother who did not. Jonah and I moved back into the house that night. I tucked him in, the blue whale under his arm, the window latch double-checked, the curtain stilled. The radiator coughed at 2:17, and I did not get up. The hallway smelled like wood and clean sheets. The city breathed outside and let us keep breathing with it. 2 days later, a package arrived with no return label. Inside, the paper crane Pilar thought she had lost, folded from a new map. Under it, a note in Rain's hand. "Next time, no stunts, only stories. R." I put the crane on Jonah's bookshelf beside the Lego rocket. "It's a friend," I told him. He tilted his head the way he does when he's deciding whether to adopt an object. "Okay," he said, and went back to drawing a whale with the blue crayon worn to a blunt, kind nose. The climax isn't a bang. It's a decision at a door with keys that are yours again. It's the moment you stop trying to choreograph the truth and let it move. When you finally let the door close on the old script, are you brave enough not to listen at the keyhole?
After headlines and statements and lawyers who bill in 15-minute increments, life became small on purpose. I quit 2 clients I'd spent years explaining to the world, and told the third I'd come back after I learned how to speak without making a mirror. I started a small practice that took on work I didn't have to keep apologizing for, even if the invoices felt like postcards from a less glamorous version of myself. Detective Vargas came by once a week at first, not for updates, those lived in emails, but to drink coffee in my kitchen and remind me that the city still belongs to people who live in it. She smelled like rain and printer paper. We talked about locks and kids and the way truth doesn't scale. When she smiled, it unknotted something behind my ribs I hadn't realized was clenched. Rain sent letters from a P.O. box with no return address. Stories about kids learning to interview their grandparents. Notes on how to file a FOIA without letting it eat your life. She didn't ask forgiveness in those letters. She didn't offer it either. We were 2 people learning to speak across a gap without making it worse. Daniel lawyered. He gave an interview on a podcast with a title that uses the word alpha and called himself a paranoid romantic. The court ordered counseling and a strict custody plan. He bought a different storage unit. The judge told him he could keep his camping gear in it and not much else. Jonah comes home from weekends with him smelling like maple syrup and lake water from a place north of the city where the air is so clean it makes your teeth feel weird. We are polite at exchanges. That is a kind of victory. Pilar taught Jonah to fold a fox out of a subway map. He leaves them in the hall by our new camera as if to feed it. I let him. Machines may not get hungry, but attention does. Some nights, I still wake at 2:17 when the radiator coughs, and I listen to the house decide what kind of story it wants to be. Then I breathe, check the latch once, and go back to bed. If a resolution is just the quieter part of the same song, can you call it an ending and mean it? I used to teach people that truth is a negotiation. Now I think it's a nervous system. You can ignore pain, but it will route around your decision and find a new way to talk to you. You can stage your love as preparedness, but your child will learn the hum of a room he shouldn't know. You can hide a confession in a prettier sentence, but a sister will mail it back to you on paper that still smells like the first apartment you grew in. I am not a better person now. I am a person who heard the radiator, the lemon cleaner, the whisper of paper, and decided those sounds were a language and not just atmosphere. I am a mother who knows where the safe room is and why we don't use it. I am a woman who stopped ghostwriting for men who pay well to keep a story on life support. Jonah's whales look like doors now. He draws them open, a mouth that is not a trap. When he asks if the notes are gone, I tell him the truth. The paper ones are. The kind that live in your chest, those you learn to read so they can stop writing themselves at night. If quiet used to be how I controlled a room, now it's how I listen to the one I love the most.
Tonight, when Jonah asked if the notes were all done, I said yes and felt the word hold. And when the radiator coughed at 2:17, the house and I both let it be just a sound.